My name is Robert Lawson, and this skiff, which belongs to the Ladysmith Maritime Society, is what we're here to talk about today. This skiff, we do not know its exact origins. It was built in the last quarter of the 19th century. The earliest record we have of it was a photograph taken here at a greasy pole contest in Esquimalt Harbor by Coal Island in 1898. This is a blow-up of the picture here. This is the same skiff. It corresponds in every detail, the positioning of the oarlocks, the positioning of the awning stanchions, the shape of the stem, the planks. And at that point, we don't know who is in the skiff in that photograph, although it is quite likely to be the civilian contractor who ran the Esquimalt Naval Base for the Royal Navy. There is also a painting done here, a view of Esquimalt Harbor in the late 1890s by a Vancouver Island artist, Lionel Barr. The skiff dinghy is here. Again, allowing for artistic license, everything corresponds. In fact, the small molding you see here was done in gold leaf. When I took the paint off, there were traces of the gold leaf. And if you look very carefully at this painting, you can see a little yellow line that the artist has put in at that location. Why do we call it Rainbow Skiff? Well, the Rainbow, which came to Canada, it was a protected cruiser built in 1892 for the Royal Navy. It was sold to Canada in 1910 and arrived in Esquimalt Harbor in November, I believe, of that year. It came with a skiff dinghy aboard. And in the photographs here, it would be hard to see in the film, but there is a skiff dinghy hanging in the after davits here. In any event, this is the day the Rainbow arrived in Victoria. There is a skiff dinghy hanging in the after davits. There is on the ship's the drawing. This is a cut from the drawing, the full-size drawing of the boat deck, and a skiff dinghy is shown mounted inside one of the cutters that were kept on board. In those days, of course, warships, merchant ships had tons of boats on them. They might have a dozen boats of different sizes for various reasons. For getting the crew back and forth. There weren't big jetties in a lot of places where they could bring the ship alongside. So they all had a large number of boats. In this particular case, British warships of the time all had skiff dinghies. They were the smallest boat usually carried on warships. This is HMS Flora in dry dock in 1905. This ship went aground in Nanaimo Harbor, and that's why it's in dry dock here being repaired. Now this is a skiff dinghy here, hanging on the stern of HMS Condor. Now HMS Condor was a sloop, of which 3 or 4 were built for the British Navy in the late 1890s. And it was here in 1901 to fit out and carry supplies to the British Naval Station in Hawaii. It left on December 2nd, 1901 and was sunk in a great storm off of Cape Flattery with the loss of all lives. The only thing that survived, except for a life jacket, a life ring, is a skiff dinghy that was found at a Husat. And the U.S. Coast Guard, while searching for the Condor's crew, was told that the skiff dinghy was at a Husat. And they negotiated with the chief at that time, and in return for his dress sword, he was allowed to have the skiff dinghy back. So it was returned to Esquimalt. We don't know what happened to it. But this is a picture here of our skiff dinghy upside down and the Condor skiff dinghy, and you can see that they are remarkably similar. The only main difference is the large bumps you see on the side of the transom here. These were an extra feature often added to wooden boats that worked around large steel warships. And they strengthened and protected the corners of the transom when they bumped up against the hull. Why is this called the Rainbow Skiff? The Rainbow was scrapped in 1919 in Seattle. All of the ship's boats, of which there were about a dozen, were kept in a squimalt in the boat storage locker. And in 1928, the boats were taken as a single lot and auctioned off. The auction listed them as the Rainbow's boats. A man named Mr. Turnbull, who worked at Coal Island off of Sydney, bought all the boats and then sold them to various local people for various purposes. This particular boat was sold to a man named Reg France in 1928, who had a small property on the waterfront on Roberts Creek in Sydney. And he took the boat and he put a small motor in it and he used it for going out for fishing and things like that. And it was kept in front of his house until he died in the late 70s. And this picture here is of the Rainbow Skiff in front of Reg France's house in Roberts Creek in Sydney, as I first saw it in 1972. Whether this boat was actually on the Rainbow, it probably was. I have a photograph, which isn't in this collection, which shows a boat identical to this tied up beside the Rainbow in Vancouver, Dominion Day 1911. This was a far higher quality boat than the skiff dinghy that would have come with the Rainbow. And it's quite possible that it was in the boat stores in a squimalt, and the commander at the Rainbow said, you know, I want a better boat for a skiff dinghy, we'll use this one. It's something we'll never know. But the name Rainbow Skiff, it has been known locally in the Sydney area since 1928 as the Rainbow Skiff. And there's a clear association with it through that auction and through the boats coming from the squimalt. I did several hundred hours of research after we acquired this boat and found some information on skiff dinghies. The lines of our skiff dinghy here are represented by this drawing on the top left corner. The next drawing is a skiff dinghy that was designed and built in 1895 for one of Queen Victoria's royal yachts. Now, as you can see, there's a significant difference in the shear line. It's much flatter. The shear line on ours has a lovely curve to it. This shear line has flattened out. Now, this drawing here is from a specification prepared for the British Admiralty for the construction of skiff dinghies. So the Royal Navy would contract out the construction of these boats. And so they produced a booklet that had all the specifications, wood, lines, every material, sailing rig, everything for skiff dinghies. And these drawings here are from this booklet. And as you can see here, we have a skiff dinghy that has the strong shear. It has the awning stanchions that you see in the picture, although they're placed slightly differently. These are awning stanchions here. It has the sailing rig. It shows the arrangement of the seats and the floorboards. Beautiful drawings, by the way. And very typical of the high quality of drawings and draftsmanship that was available in the late 19th century. Now, this boat has some unusual features. It's planked with larch, which was very common for English lap-strake boat construction. The backbone, the keel, the stem, the transom, and the stern post are teak. All of the other woodwork on the boat, except for the ribs are oak, English oak, but all the other woodwork is teak, or was teak. The missing seats were teak. all the fittings, the gratings in the floor, the seats, everything would have been teak. The gunnels here and the sheer plank are teak. The interesting thing about these gunnels is something you never see anymore. This gunnel, from bow to stern, is a single piece of teak that has been steamed and fitted over the tops of the ribs. It has been rabbeted away so that the sheer plank fits flush against it. It makes an immensely strong gunnel, far stronger than the gunnel you would normally see on a lap straight boat, which is an inner piece of wood and an outer piece of wood fastened through. Now, the other interesting and very unusual thing about this is that you never see in rowing boats anymore. Normally in a rowboat, you have a thwart and you have a rowlock on each side. The rower has 2 oars, one on each side of the boat. However, in the 18th and 19th centuries, a lot of boats were built to row whaleboat style. In whaleboat style, the oars are staggered. So there's an oarlock here for the forward thwart. There's a pair of oarlocks here for the middle thwart. And for the after thwart, there is an oarlock here. So there would be one man here with a single oar, one man here with 2 oars, and one man here with a single oar. This is known as whaleboat style. Very, very unusual and rare to see a boat today that still has that oarlock arrangement. And if you look carefully at these drawings, you know, by 1900, they had superseded that, and they had gone to what we see nowadays with oarlocks matching on each side of the boat at each of the rowing positions. So, again, that helps to date this. If the specification by the late 19th century, say around 1898, 1900, had moved to what we now know as standard rowlock position, this would be closer to perhaps 1890 or 1880 in that period. It was still from the height of the Victorian Navy. In most boats, the reinforcing in the stern here would be large wooden knees. This is a much higher quality boat, and the knees were cast, beautifully cast in bronze. The same applies at the bow. It is a magnificent, complex casting that forms what is known as the breasthook. It caps the stem, it provides strength, tying this all together. Normally, in a cheaper form of construction, there would have been a large wooden knee fitted in there. The same applies to where the seats were. These slots are where bronze knees that were fitted that went down and tied the seat to the side of the boat and gave immense strength in case it hit anything from the side. In this case here, the remains of 4 of the bronze knees. At some point when Reg France owned the boat, he cut the teak seats out because they were in his way, and he didn't bother having knees anymore. As you can see in the photograph, he just put plywood decking over, and that substituted in a somewhat diminished way for the strength that the thwarts and the bronze knees are. Pieces of bronze are the remnants of the 6 bronze knees that supported the thwarts. This is the only remaining bronze lower fitting for the oarlocks. There was one at each oarlock position, and it held the lower part of the large bronze oarlock. 4 thin pieces of bronze in the background are remnants of the broken stern. The iron hook there was a special type of bolt that went through the stem, which has been replaced with a bronze one here that was used for the large mooring line. And these are new gudgeons and pintles that were made up for a new rudder that is yet to be built. One of the particularly beautiful things about this skiff is this wonderful wine glass stern. Now this stern, you rarely see a stern like this anymore. You may see a wine glass stern, but the planking does not go right down to the keel as it does here. Most boats that show a stern like this will have what's called a built-up deadwood bolted on. The planking stops here and there's just a piece of fitted wood to take the place here. But this is very traditional stern construction for this type of boat, probably dating back to Henry VIII's time. So the whole stern was fitted with bronze to protect the ends of the planking, protect the stern, and to give it the whole thing extra strength. This piece here is a frame piece for the stern seat to attach to the stern post. When I got this boat back in 2008, it had had a new stem put in. The original stem was long gone. The stem that was replaced had rotted out, but it had been replaced at some point many years ago. The inner part of the stern post was replaced by my friend John Rod. But the boat itself had a huge hole in the transom. Part of the metalwork was missing. The boat itself was twisted, a 15-degree twist from bow to stern. A number of planks were badly split. The garboards had pulled away from the boat. It was very, very close to what a number of people refer to as burned material. So I set it up in our yard, and I carefully, over time, pulled everything back together, took the twist out of it, removed the paint. There were many layers of paint. And the interesting thing is that the paint confirmed, in many ways, the history of the boat. The color, the blue turquoise color, was a color, of course, that Reg France had used when he owned the boat. And there's a darker blue underneath that he probably used. And then we came to white. Now, as you can see in the picture from 1898, the hull is white and the shear plank is all varnished, as we see now. However, underneath the white paint, we came to black. Well, in the late 19th century, the Victorian Navy went through a period where the warships were painted black and their dinghies were painted black. They were painted black with varnished shear strakes. The interiors were a cream color. And underneath the black paint was, of course, the traditional lead oxide paint, which was sealed the wood and made a very good base for further coats of paint. Now, in the interior of the boat, again, it was a mess. I stripped off all the paint, very long, laborious process. Repaired with epoxy and modern materials to stabilize the keel. And there's still lots of work to do. Now, the skiff is a wonderful display, like this. It's preserved, it's safe. It could go on like this for a century or two. However, it could also be restored. It could be restored, and so that you would have the seats, you would have the teak gratings, you would have everything done as in the drawings, and the skiff could even, for special occasions, be put in the water. Of course, these things take lots of time and money. And while a fund was established for the Rainbow Skiff many years ago and is in the credit union, and I believe there's slightly over $1,000 in it, it would probably need around $30,000 to complete the project. So whether that ever happens or not is an unknown. But the important thing to know about this particular vessel is you can search online in all the maritime museums in the world, and you can put in searches for skiff dinghy, and you will not find another one anywhere on the planet. That doesn't mean to say that in some little muddy creek in England, or some backwater in Europe, or some place in some former colony that there isn't one or two of these tucked away. But in terms of searching, for all intents and purposes, this is the only one left of what would have been thousands of small boats like this in the period from the 18th to the early 20th century. In terms of this particular object, the most important thing, putting the history aside, is it represents the end of a long tradition of lap-strake boat building going back to the time of the Vikings. This particular style of boat building produced boats that were light and strong, could be beached, and could be bounced around on beaches in surf without major damage. Whereas a carvel-built boat would start leaking and coming apart much more quickly in the same circumstances. These boats, lap-strake boats, were used all over the world by different cultures, different countries, and were very, very safe and effective boats for doing what they were designed to do. Now, by the end of the 19th century, machines had started taking over in many aspects of the small boat building trade. Things would be built with patterns, so patterns would be made of planks, and they would then be run through big machines so that dozens of planks could be turned out at the same time. All sorts of other things to reduce the amount of hand labor were introduced, and this resulted in design changes like the flattening of the shear, the complexity of the stern no longer being appearing in boats built perhaps after 1900. Everything was made so that more could be done with less labor and more product produced in time. So with this particular skiff, it really does mark the end of the era of boat building done by skilled people, by hand, for, in effect, centuries.